indirect and direct impacts of things like climate change, water scarcity, or indeed the availability of food or oil are impacting the production and affordability of the food products in our system. Sustainable supply is critically important to our business. We're on a journey. We know we've got a long way to go, but we've already achieved a lot, and we have a great foundation to build on. It will mean we'll be able to supply things like Big Macs and quarter pounders for our customers for years to come. It's also a fantastic leadership opportunity for our business. McDonald's is a big player, and we're able to leverage our size and scale and influence to bring real positive change to the industry. What's unique about McDonald's is the long-term partnership that we have with our suppliers, which enables them to invest in the future. We know our biggest impacts, and indeed our biggest challenges, are in agriculture. We literally have hundreds of thousands of farmers supplying raw materials into McDonald's. So the challenge is to impact standards of sustainability and sustainability practices on their farms. And that's why we developed McDonald's Agricultural Assurance Programme. That's been running for 10 years now. Some of the farmers with the best sustainability practices we're profiling in our Flagship Farms programme and using them to influence others. Animal welfare is one of those areas that perhaps we've been working on for the longest. All of our eggs now are either free range or barn, and we're continuing to do much more.
We have a sustainable sourcing commitment which prioritises key raw materials that we want to address, such as soy, palm oil, wood fibre and beef. Out of all of our commodities globally, beef is our greatest environmental impact, so we've set up a global roundtable to address this issue.
Traditionally, customers don't necessarily believe everything we tell them. That's why external third-party certification is important to us. That builds on the move we made in 2007 when we had all of the coffee we sell in Europe certified by the Rainforest Alliance, or UTZ certified.
We've done a lot of work on packaging already, but now we've pulled it together under a holistic strategy that means that we're going to use as little of it as possible, as much renewable material as we can, and to use only recycled or certified virgin fibre. It also means that we're going to have a greater focus on enabling recycling from the restaurants, and that's going to be a big challenge going forward. We're working along the whole length of our supply chain, not just in agriculture, but also in manufacturing and logistics. We ask our suppliers to complete an environmental scorecard that looks at energy, water, waste and emissions to air, and ask suppliers to make improvements each year. So it's not just the environmental aspects of sustainability that we look at, it's also the social aspects. And we have a program for employment practices which all of our suppliers have to comply with. Once our products are made, we then have to get them to the restaurants, and we have to make sure that we store them and transport them in the most sustainable way possible. We're committed to addressing greenhouse gas emissions across our whole business, and in 2007 we measured the carbon footprint of our European supply chain. That work showed us that 75% of our emissions are from agriculture, which is by far the most difficult for us to influence. We've set clear expectations of our suppliers on reductions, and we have a variety of programs in place to do this.
This is a long journey for us. We've been working on it for over a decade. In supply chain, it's all about assuring supply to the restaurants. But wouldn't it be great if one day we could say to our customers, everything you purchase in a McDonald's is sustainably sourced.
What did you come away with when you went to McDonald's? What is new? Can you put your microphone?
Continuous environmental
What kind of technology?
Normally, if we go to any shop, we can find only plastic papers for packaging or for selling. But they have used advanced, which is the recycling packaging model. Then they have proper supply chain management control techniques and adaptation of database store index, and they concern for water preservation and new technologies in that too. A modernized environment.
Okay.
Concern for the people because food is the most important one.
Okay.
So, clean environment.
Okay. Anybody else?
So decentralization, that is like the freedom within the framework which made them to work independently within different countries and within the policies, but having a bottom line for concern to the environment and sustainability also.
So that's a good point too. So you had a balance between centralization and decentralization. So who does what and how does it reflect the local voice, right? Okay. So that was one of the key takeaways from this, right? Okay. What else happened in this case?
Third-party certification.
Pardon?
The third-party certification
Third-party certification. On what area?
for providing that the source is green. The sourcing is green.
Okay. Okay. What else happened? Now this is a global company, right? This is a global company, right? So it had to maintain standards all over the world, right?
Suppliers who are supplying the raw materials, they should be on their quality. If it is not there, they are just rejecting the whatever things they are supplied from the world suppliers. And on the other case, if they are maintaining the quality continuously, they are giving incentives.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Okay. Now this is a very unique business model, right? Because we have never seen a case of owner-operator. It's a franchising, right? About 87% of all the McDonald operations are owner-operated. So it is difficult for you as a company to infuse your standards and values on an independent company. Okay. Now, what is the global aspect of this case? What are some of the global things which you saw? You saw it in the video. Taiwan from packaging, that's fine, but what is the crux of the case in terms of the global part? It was about what? Pardon? Yeah, can you expand on that? Okay, deforestation. Now, cattle slaughter was fine, but I think the main crux in this case was about the Brazilian Amazon forest, the soya production over there, right? They wanted to maintain the forestry, right? So how did they come out of that equation? Because the soya part of the product was very small compared to the McDonald operation. But what did they decide to do? They decided to plunge in. They decided to plunge in to set the right debate. And what is the debate? That we will not source from these forests which need to be preserved. Am I right? Right? They work with Cargill. So one of the, other than the centralization and decentralization concepts, one of the other powerful takeaways from this particular case is the role of social activism. Greenpeace. How the moment Greenpeace started to put these things publicly and protested about the use of the virgin Amazon forest by not only, by the way, it is not even Cargill. It is a company where Cargill had a lot of ownership stake in, okay, which was making this soya thing. And it was not a very big part of their product line anyway. And so they took a very proactive, forward-looking role saying that we need to deal with this, and to get Greenpeace to give them positive credit was amazing, because Greenpeace generally does not give any company possible credit, especially McDonald's. They're really after McDonald's because it is this evil industrial beast which is, in so many countries and making these profits. And they found it very surprising that McDonald's was willing to take a social activism type of stand, saying that there's a moratorium, that in 2 or 3 years, we will not source from these particular forests, right? So you saw their mission statement, which included, like you mentioned, because it is food, that you want to have safe products without any supply interruption, but also creating a net benefit to employees, communities, biodiversity, and the environment. It is the largest food service retailer in the world, okay? And they think of themselves as a three-legged stool. The three-legged stool is suppliers who supply to McDonald's, owner-operators, and the employees, right? So every decision has to be taken into account these three-legged stool. Now, if you think about the spend, they're making significant amount of spend, $18 billion, right? It's a lot of money that they're spending in at least three major categories, which is food, toys, and paper. And the four largest purchase categories: beef, chicken, packaging, and dairy products. So these four are the most important product categories that they're spending on. So what they did in terms of supply chain is to create a group called Sustainable Supply Chain Working Group, and they were supposed to set policies for the tools and strategies to implement sustainable sourcing. So they felt that they were in the cutting edge of leading in the restaurant industry, and you saw also in the video they're very much concerned about human social welfare. So you saw in the case they were talking about some of the practices they were doing which is not right, in terms of stunning the animals, and they started to ban that practice, because it was not to the social good and so on. So one of the things which got a lot of public press and attention is Cargill situation, where the supplier was supposed to have sourced soya from Amazon forest, which was supposed to be preserved. On the supply chain point of view, as many of you talked about already, the criteria is very stringent, that they want to have consistent supply. So you want to have enough product out there right in time. It should be of excellent quality and it should be of competitive pricing. So these are the strict standards for all the franchisees of McDonald's. So the ingredients are important, the appearance is also very important, and they used to conduct random visits to the suppliers to check for quality, and those who did not provide good quality and service were terminated, and those who did were rewarded by loyalty and volume of business. So it's a global supply chain with significant purchasing power and complexity. And you see this throughout the case. They talk about freedom within the framework. The freedom within the framework is that headquarters sets the framework, and the local regional managers has some flexibility and leeway in working around that framework. So that's what we see. Okay. So their focus was that the headquarters wanted to support owner-operators and restaurant managers. So the framework provides a set of guidelines for operational excellence and brands by setting standards for things like product ingredients, what you should buy, whom you should buy from, restaurant cleanliness, and then how you use the Golden Arches logo. Okay, but within that they also had some freedom. The freedom was that the one who is closest to the customer is better positioned to do better business in that local area. So they give the freedom to the localization manager, that you can have some flexibility provided that you adhere to the broad guidelines given by the headquarters. So the same freedom within freedom structure also applied to supply chain. So they had a global governance team, supply leadership board, which determined the framework, how to carry out the procurement activities, sustainability activities, and so on. And they set the standard for quality, business policies, and practices related to supply chain. But as you saw in the quote in the case, the supply chain is not one whole, but we had a lot of little supply chain functioning together. So the decentralized supply chain would buy large amounts of local products that met many types of specifications. So this is how the freedom within the freedom worked in the supply chain. So important to realize that we had to comply with not only the headquarter guidelines but also with the local guidelines and the national regulations in that particular country. So the food subject to foodborne illness, natural disasters and other factors, and the firm needs to, like we saw in the beginning of the lecture about risk, they need to have a business continuity plan. What happens if something goes wrong, right? And one such contingency plan is not to have just sole suppliers or dual suppliers, but for the same product in the same region, right? And because of very large volumes and high quality and competitive prices, there were typically very few alternative suppliers which were available in the system, right? So they would almost always change suppliers as warranted, and these changes tend to be costly and disruptive. It's not the largest purchaser of goods, for instance, okay? So the food supply chains, both nationally and globally, tend to be not only fragmented but poorly integrated. So it was interesting to take a look at the hamburger case, that they purchased hamburger patties only from 6 approved vendors, and these approved vendors in turn purchased from 30 approved abattoirs, and these abattoirs in turn worked with some designated cow farms, right? So that is how the hierarchy of the purchase happened with hamburger, right? So the questions we're asking are, the questions we ask is that, okay, if you are the CEO, how would you prioritize the different supply chain goals, cost versus safety, and so on? So one way to look at this prioritization, we're going to see on Monday, is to use the weights to reflect the importance compared to the strategy. The different, and you may have to, as the case kind of unfolds, you can't have a same scorecard for every region. You have to customize the scorecard for each region. But the basic criteria, cleanliness, quality, that is much you can add. So you tailor from different local regions, and I think to come full loop, what you want to do is to do some cross-selling. What is happening in Egypt, what's happening in the United States and Canada can be assimilated, and we can get a lot of best practices from this. Okay, so I'll come to green first. And the beef supply, and then the major part of the case, which is the Amazon rainforest and soya. So because of the global of McDonald's, they are kind of forced to chip in. It's not that they can say, well, this is not my issue, I may stay back, and do things right. So for instance, you saw that when Cargill was trying to struggle with dealing with the soya issue, when the moment McDonald's chipped in, they felt very good. They felt very comfortable that here's a big company trying to make sure that we do right with respect to sustainable forest. So the partnership with Cargill is a very good example to illustrate that. So the key part, key takeaway from this case that I would like you to remember is the blend. So head coach should provide and direction of chain and sustainability and so on. And local managers should provide the customized input of what is happening in that particular region. So it should be like a circular loop between localization. localized should inform future headquarters as well. But they always imposes that policy, but the local input should inform the future policy. So there should be a loop in between localization and centralization place when we strategy. Now, second main point in this particular case is the role of social activists. How did they play a role in changing McDonald's policy? Okay, so one of the takeaways that we can get from McDonald's, which they did exceedingly well, is open dialogue with Greenpeace, not a confrontational one, not an avoidance one, and so on. And remember, they gathered their own data. Okay, they didn't rely on what Greenpeace. The Greenpeace itself, by the way, had like a 140-page document over there on the web. But they said, no, we're going to gather our spirit of the mission rather than going through the motion. So you should have your heart into really changing the underlying picture, like, caring for the forestry, than just going through collective voice of all the stakeholders, right? That's what made this engagement with very interesting. Yet they made this based on every time they had a trade-off, so they didn't know what to do. They went back to their core mission and value for guidance. Okay, so this is a spectacular case of what you do when you're in, an the end should be an issue. I mean, the end, of course, makes not to be. All right. So, how is the consolidation occurring in the food industry, and how does it affect long-term relationships? You see the formation of a lot of coalition groups. Many of you mentioned standards and so on. So these concerted action was taking place through industry forums. So they had industry forums on pork, industry forums on beef, industry forums on fisheries. So they were using this to formulate their purchasing and sustainability strategy. So in all of these areas, they had dedicated scorecards to influence the supply chain, something which we're going to see in this class as well. So what happened in the case? What's the update? Frank Muschetto, who was the same leader, he left the company after 31 years at McDonald's, but they said that just because he left, they're not going to change our mission towards sustainability supply. The Brazilian authorities really clamped down on Cargill. They forced them to shut down a large river port in the city of Santarém that was built to export the soya. They just shut it down. The authorities claim that this is typically what is happening. They don't give the real reason. They claim that they didn't submit a comprehensive environmental report before building the plant, and they used that excuse to kick them out. But the local farmers saw that as a blow, because they said, here is the company, Cargill, which could have brought economic development in an otherwise lawless region. So this is one of the complexities of multinationals dealing with developing world. Okay? Alright, so this is what the case illustrated in terms of lessons learned. That the corporate strategy is intimately connected with sustainability. The impact of global supply chain on the triple bottom line, which is the people, environment, and corporate policies. The complexities and practical realities of managing, remember Pester, of managing social, environmental impacts within a large multinational company. So every time a multinational company goes into a developing country, they have to deal with Pester. They have to deal with these factors. And no approach is uniform. This is an approach in sustainability as decided by the government, as decided by the NGOs, as decided by the local producers. Okay? So the impact of sustainability on profits have to be evaluated, because that cannot be neglected. But this is also a blend between what I call as localization and centralization, local cultural practices and priorities on global strategy. And it shows how McDonald's partnered effectively with a lot of stakeholders and within their corporate functions as well. And finally, there's a complex web which connects companies, multinational companies, with NGOs, government, consumers, and producers around the world. You need to take into account all of these factors when you formulate the policy. Okay, so any questions on McDonald's before the last topic I want to discuss is about the green sourcing guidelines. Any questions on McDonald's? It's a very descriptive case. It talked about how this company really functions in the global space, including sustainability, and brings in that one example of the soya farm controversy in Brazil to show the role of activism and how they dealt with it. Okay? Alright, so let's talk about the final point we want to discuss the green sourcing. So the drivers behind environmental protection, green sourcing is not only the regulatory mandate but also to bring down the cost. So things like steel, electricity, fossil fuel costs and so on. And you have the proactive benefit of PR building, public image and reputation building. So how do we include greening in our sourcing strategies? Okay, so one area you can look at is spend analysis. So you're going to look at direct cost, indirect cost of environmental cost, and consider the environmental regulations, identify cost with green impact, and also the drivers of the cost. What is driving that particular cost element? Okay, in the internal supply chain within the company, you look at the specification review process. How do you set your specification to include environmentally sound metrics and services? So for example, you can look at energy efficient sourceable items. You can define specs in terms of performance terms, collaborate with internal stakeholders, and construct a spend model which looks at not only this year but life cycle costs. Okay. Then you look at the supply market. Who is out there? Who can provide these capability? What are the green suppliers with existing specs and potential suppliers that can support green specs? Yesterday I asked at least two of the teams to consider the textile supply chain and Ayurvedic products. This would be a very good right area to look at the sourcing part of it. And you don't have to look at all of the sourcing products. Take the most critical one. Take one of them and then go through this process. You know, what is the state of specs and how much of the green specs are involved in the sourcing of the product. And if they're not doing it, you should propose that they're doing it. Why are they not doing it? Right? Okay? So then you can tend to qualify new green vendors. So you can kind of make the case of lean and green. You can say that by being green, they can also be lean and efficient. Okay? So you qualify the new green vendors to perform the initial supplier assessment after considering the environmental impact on the processes, materials, and services. I'm not sure how far detailed you can go into these types of things, but you can create a checklist and see if they're doing this, and if they're not doing it, you know, why are they not doing it. So after the end of today's session, I will keep these slides available for you, so you can immediately use it in your project as a screening process. You know, for all the projects that you do in the supply chain, if you're going to look at the procurement side of it, this gives you a checklist of what to do. Okay? Alright, so step 4 is to develop the sourcing strategy, assessing the alignment of supplier environmental capabilities with your own corporate responsibility goals. And if you hold off, by the way, until Monday, you will have a comprehensive supplier scorecard understanding, hands-on exercise, which you can then take to your project as well. Okay? So you evaluate alternative environmentally friendly materials. What other materials can you do? What are the different processes can you do? Where else can you source from the geography? And what else? What are the technologies that you can do? Right? Then you can develop a supplier request for proposal (RFP), which will have both the quantitative criteria, which we mentioned just a while ago, but you can also use qualitative criteria like what is the culture in the organization, how responsive they are to the company requests, and those types of things. Okay? Step 5 is to implement the sourcing strategy. So the total cost should be considered. For example, equipment plus the energy impact across the life cycle of the sourcing process. the whole stakeholder review sessions of the green selection criteria, which is the scorecard, and then finally award and maintain the contract. And once you do it for one particular product, you can institutionalize this across the board, and you develop a set of metrics that the vendors will be evaluated across the contract length. You may have a 3-year contract, 2-year contract, 1-year contract. So you see which metrics are important. And gradually some metrics will come away and new metrics will be added. So I wanted to give you some examples of the sustainability part. So on the green effectiveness, you can look at packaging, you can look at energy use, you can look at the extent of hazardous materials and recycling. And the metrics in the scorecard can be this: the power use, the total kilowatt hours used per year, percentage of paper, wood products, and renewable products. You already seen this in multiple cases already. Percentage of recycled material and the total greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, if they are measuring. So to sum up, the green sourcing will require modifications to existing sourcing. So you will be looking at what they're doing currently and try to layer on the environmental. That's what I've been harping all along. Pick a supply chain topic and then layer on a sustainability and a energy angle to it. Okay? So involvement of internal stakeholders. So these are something which you can study by way of a case interview. Who is involved in sourcing? Is it just the owner manager or some other functional person? Are they having, sometimes in small companies, the design, engineering, marketing is all the same person. You know, the owner. So if they are different, you can kind of interview them and see what's going on. So their electronic industry code of conduct says no child labor. Okay, management systems training in the code of conduct, health and safety emergency preparedness, pollution prevention, and then ethics, which is community engagement. So they not only adopted this themselves, but they also enforce this on the suppliers. So they work with errant suppliers instead of firing them, with the exception being the serious violators, probably child labor is the serious one. And this is the first year suppliers then trained, itself got trained in the code of conduct. Then they passed it on to the first year. First year trained the second year. So they used collaborations with NGOs to conduct the training, and they included environmental performance as specific criteria for supplier selection. So the carrot and stick policy that they use is that they increase the weight for environmental performance from 4 to 10%, and the stick was that if you didn't comply, then you were deducted 10 points from the overall score in terms of the supply. Okay, so we are going to stop here. Do you have any questions on what we covered here today? Comments, suggestions, questions? Can you speak out? I'm going to send it right away. The internet connection is not good here. As soon as I go to my room, I will send it. Okay? So a reminder is that on Monday, all of you need to bring your laptops. Okay? And I had already sent the Walmart code of conduct of ethical suppliers. Bring that handout with you. And I will be sending you an Excel spreadsheet on the LEED standards. And I will give you some basic theoretical knowledge about design of scorecard, and after that you will immediately go into your team and you will be designing an environmental scorecard, and I will be picking on maybe 2 teams to come and present to the class. Okay, so I will make my presentation first. I will give you some guidelines on the design of the scorecard, and then we will have a hands-on activity, and then depending on the time we may have 2 or 3 teams to actually present to the class about the. Okay, is that understood? Alright, so that's what we're going to do. Alright, so read the Walmart scorecard and bring your, and I will send the spreadsheet on to you. Okay? Alright. Any other questions, comments? Okay, let's wait for that. I don't think we have anything in the afternoon, so you're free to go. Yeah. Okay, this is a bonus. Yeah.